You ever listen to someone speak Chinese and think, hang on, are they just saying the same word over and over? Well, you're not wrong. Mandarin Chinese is absolutely packed with words that sound identical but mean wildly different things. So let's dive in and figure out why that is.
All right, so to kick things off, we're going to look at one of the most extreme examples you can find. It's this famous and honestly kind of mind-boggling piece of classical Chinese literature that perfectly sets up the puzzle we're about to solve. So this right here, this is the opening line of a story called The Lion-Eating Poet in the Stone Den. Now, in English, it means a poet named Shi loved lions and vowed to eat 10 lions. But here's the crazy part. In Mandarin, every single word in the entire story is pronounced she. I mean, it just sounds like she. You get it. It's a whole narrative that sounds like one syllable on repeat.
So that leaves us with the big question, right? How is this even possible? How on earth can a language function like this? How can a string of identical sounds tell a coherent story about a poet and some very unlucky lions? Well, to get to the bottom of this, we've got to break down a key idea.
So what we're dealing with here is something called a homophone. It's when different words share the exact same pronunciation. And look, this isn't some weird thing that only happens in Chinese. You actually use them all the time in English without even realizing it.
I mean, in English, we've got pairs like C and C, or 8 and 8. They're pretty harmless, maybe you use one in a clever pun. But here's the thing, in Mandarin, we're not just talking about a handful of these pairs. We're talking about thousands. They are literally everywhere. So, why the massive difference?
Okay, that brings us to our first huge clue, and it's basically a numbers game. The root of the problem is what you could call a syllable squeeze. Mandarin just has a really limited toolbox of sounds to work with.
Just take a look at this. The difference is, wow, English has this huge sound library, over 10,000 different syllables to build words from. And Mandarin, it's got about 400. That's it, just 400.
To put that into perspective, that's fewer unique sounds to build an entire language than the number of drink combinations you could order at a big coffee shop. It's a shockingly small toolbox for such a rich and complex language.
So here's the challenge, right? You've got around 3,000 commonly used characters, each one with its own unique meaning that you need to say out loud, but you've only got about 400 sounds to assign to them. You can probably see where this is headed.
Yeah, the result is this epic pileup of sounds. It's a total syllable traffic jam. You end up with dozens of different words all trying to squeeze into the same phonetic parking spot. But Chinese has a really clever trick up its sleeve to help direct some of this traffic.
And that trick brings us to our next piece of the puzzle. It's a partial solution, and it's probably the most famous feature of the language, the tones. This is how Mandarin starts to create more distinct sounds from its very limited set.
So Mandarin has 4 main tones. It's kind of like you're singing each syllable. You've got a high flat one, like you're just holding a note. Then there's a rising one that goes up, like you're asking a question. Then one that dips down and comes back up. And finally, a sharp falling one, like you're giving an order.
And this is a perfect example of how it works. Let's go back to our old friend she. If you say it with that high, flat tone, she, that means teacher. With the rising tone, she, it's the number 10. With that little dipping tone, sh, it means poop. And with a sharp falling tone, she, it means city. See? Same sound, 4 tones, 4 totally different words.
So, okay, tones definitely help. A lot. They basically triple our sound library from 400 to about 1,200. But that's still tiny compared to English, and it's not nearly enough to give all 3,000 of those common characters their own unique sound. The traffic jam is eased for sure, but it is not gone. So, if tones aren't the final answer, what is?
All right, this is where we get to the real secret weapon of the Chinese language. There's one last piece to this puzzle that just blows the whole thing wide open and makes everything crystal clear, even when the sounds are identical.
So, the final solution. The real answer to how that whole shit story can actually work.
It's the written characters, the Hanzi. See, this isn't just another partial fix. This is the whole shebang. This is the core of the system. Because while the spoken sounds can be super ambiguous, the written words, they are 100% unique. It's how over 1 billion people can communicate with perfect clarity every single day. Okay, let's take that syllable she again with the falling tone. If you just hear it spoken out loud with no context, it could be any of these things. But when it's written down, you see instantly, like zero confusion, if it means to be, or a matter, a city,
to try, or a room. Same exact sound, completely different character, totally different meaning. When you read Chinese, that whole homophone problem, it doesn't just get smaller, it completely vanishes.
Okay, so now that we've kind of cracked the code on the language itself, let's talk about the cultural side effects. Because having this many homophones isn't just some technical detail. It's shaped Chinese culture in some really funny and sometimes pretty serious ways.
For starters, homophones are basically a goldmine for puns. A super classic example you hear every Chinese New Year is the saying, Nian Nian Yo Yu, which means, may you have fish every year. Well, that sounds exactly the same as Nian Nian Yo Yu, which means may you have a surplus every year. And that's why fish are such a huge symbol of prosperity. It's a giant pun.
But this whole thing gets real serious when we start talking about numbers. The number 8, ba, sounds kind of like fa, which means to get rich. So that's a good one. But the number 4, si, sounds almost identical to si, the word for death. Yeah, not so great. On the flip side, 9, ju, sounds exactly like the word for long-lasting jiu. And believe me, this isn't just some trivia night fun fact. It has a massive impact on real life. You'll see tons of buildings in China that just skip the 4th floor, and the 14th, and the 24th, gone. License plates with 888 on them are seen as incredibly lucky, and people will pay a fortune for them. And the number 9 is super popular for weddings, right? It's all about symbolizing a long-lasting marriage.
So, where does that leave us? Is this whole homophone thing a flaw in the language that makes it confusing, or is it actually the source of its incredible richness and cultural depth? And the answer is, well, it's kind of both, isn't it? It can absolutely make learning to speak tricky sometimes, but at the same time, it creates this language that's just layered with so much humor and symbolism. It's like a constant shared inside joke. And somehow, against all the odds, it just works.